Welcome to Speak Up International with Rita Burke and Elton Brown.
We are back on Canadian shores. As Elton said, we are SpeakUP International. That means that we have an opportunity to have conversations with people from all over the globe. Today we're going to be talking with a man who is in Ottawa, Canada, and his name is Trevor Dunlop. Mr. Dunlop calls himself a solutionist who helps people and businesses solve complex problems and achieve financial security. He has a successful track record in the spacecraft industry and has invested over 18 years in personal development and financial intelligence. Mr. Dunlop is the founder of a mind development program, which we'll hear much more about during this conversation. And as we say on SpeakUP International, we prefer if our guests tell their own stories. And so we will hear Mr. Dunlop's story. So Trevor Dunlop, I welcome you to SpeakUP International.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Elton, also.
Oh, I thought you forgot about me.
My apologies. Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Elton.
I'm only joking.
All good.
Glad to have you with us as a part of the family. What inspired you to transition from a highly specialized career in spacecraft engineering into the world of finance and personal development?
Thank you for that question, Elton. And the funniest thing about it is that this, strange enough, is a question that many people would actually have in their head, but sometimes not quite sure how to actually ask, or even if to ask it, right? Because sometimes people may think that you're crazy for doing something like that, especially when considering that at the time when I resigned from my spacecraft engineering career, at that time I was a program manager, spacecraft engineering specialist. I was responsible for the satellite ground systems in the rocket. And my client was Lockheed Martin, which is the largest aerospace company in the world. Now to leave that, to then transition into the world of finance, to have my own finance business, especially in the climate today where people are trying so hard to get into jobs, and then you have a job that is so secure, to then leave that to do this. You know, you could almost tell some people might be thinking either you're crazy or maybe you didn't actually leave. Maybe the people got rid of you. Maybe you weren't good enough, right? There's all kinds of things you can imagine people are thinking, but you cannot, you sometimes don't want to elude it, to let them know that you might be aware of their thinking, because and at the same time as well, you got to be aware of the possibility that they're thinking this way. But anyway, going back to where it all started, it was since I was living in the UK, hence my trip for the UK in a few days' time. I was living in the UK for most of my life. And it was in 2010. At that time, I was an engineering manager for spacecraft payloads. And at that time, I was working for a company that's now called Airbus Defence and Space. And they're the largest aerospace company in Europe. And whilst I was in that job, one day, you kind of had to reflect back on where you came from in your life today. And I thought back even up to the time when I was like 19, 20 years old, when I had finished my advanced level studies, right? And I did very good in my studies. So even though I knew I had big goals and dreams planned, if someone had said to me whilst I was in those days in Guyana, South America, somebody had said, Trevor, when you get to so-and-so age, this is what your life is going to look like. my life at the time when I was in the UK was 40 years old then. And I would not have had the capacity to believe them, right? Even though at that time I was very spiritual person. I also was forward thinking. I've got goals and dreams. I knew I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to build cars, right? And I was doing really, really good in my academic stuff and so on. But yet at the same time, I had no capacity to believe if anyone had said to me that, Trevor, when you get to 40 years old, this is what your life is going to look like. Zero chance. It was too big. My imagination couldn't stretch that far. And I thought to myself that you pretty much become over, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but you overcame with gratitude, an extremely strong sense of gratitude, recognizing that there was definitely a supreme being that was playing a part in your life, right? And then when considering that not everything was bright and rosy, with a lot of tough challenges that I had to go through, and to still be at that point in my life, it was a lot of gratitude I had for that. And I thought to myself, okay, well, my life has been very heavily blessed. That was also the year my first son was born as well. At that time, I bought my second house then. A few years, 10 years prior, I was in a solid job. I was a British citizen as well by then. I also was on track for being in a position where I could resign. I shouldn't say resign, but I fully paid off my home in my early 50s and well on my way to being able to retire comfortably, right? And so when I overcame with gratitude, I realized to myself that I've been heavily blessed in my life. And it would be good if I could become a blessing to others, right? So from that point onwards, my brain predominantly started shifting. How can I help people? How can I help people? And it was during that period I got the idea about helping to recondition people's mind. Because many people, their results of their life is predominantly, is basically the result of what's been going on in their thinking and their past experience. And we know that your thinking is heavily influenced by your circle plus your environment, which therefore mean that these things condition you. And there's a lot of effort that's also spent to condition people to think a certain way. And that way of thinking doesn't necessarily allow a person to end up in a very good life. So that's where the first idea kicked in. And then so when I moved to Canada, the decision still remained. So I then ended up setting a date in my black book, a date when I want to leave the job world to be full-time in business and finance. Because in MindDev, they have 4 elements, which is 4 types of wealth, and all 4 are important. One is relationship, the next one is time, the next one is money, and the other one is health. And these
I want to interrupt you there for a little bit, because
Mhm.
we're going to get into that a little bit more. But it sounds to me, Trevor Dunlop, as if you've had lots of successes in your life. And it sounds to me as well as if you are a very focused person, because you said you gave yourself a date. But let me segue a little bit into what are common threads between spacecraft engineering and financial success? Do you see common threads running through those two fields?
Yes, so perfect, thank you. So what I'm going to do, I'll answer this one just as I end the previous one as well. So recognizing the 4 types of wealth, The fourth one was money, which therefore means that if I'm to help people, I need to help them with regards to the money side, which therefore means the financial wealth. So now, knowing that I have to do that financial side, whether I had a spacecraft engineering background or a background in servicing or anything else, and it had no connection to finance, for me it was irrelevant, right? Because I recognize where my life is going, and I need to be ready to shift into that phase. But if I now swing back now and show the connection between finance and spacecraft engineering, one of the big things with regards to engineering is that, as we know, it's maths and science and physics and a lot of calculations and a lot of algorithms, which means you deal with a lot of numbers, right? And you're processing numbers, you're predicting, you're analyzing, you're creating, right? You're solving problems. What is finance? Exactly the same thing. It's just processing numbers, looking at the facts, obtaining the information, trying to understand where you want to go, where you are today, where you want to go. And you just got to process those numbers. So for myself, because of being very strong with engineering and maths, that element, I'm able to bring that into finance, which now puts me at a bit of an edge compared to most financial professionals you'll ever meet. Because I'm able to take real solid maths, and one of the books I've got over here is programming, all of that stuff. I'm able to bring that into the world of finance. So I'm able to do things that most people cannot do.
Earlier you talked about mindset and how setting your mind, being focused in terms of knowing what it is that you wanted to achieve. So how do you apply the mindset of 100% success demanded in space engineering to help clients achieve financial security?
Beautiful. Thank you for that question. And in fact, one of the beautiful things about it is that for myself, because of the years of doing spacecraft engineering, over 26 years, now it's no longer a mindset element. It's more along the line of it's in your DNA now. There's nothing you just cannot do anything otherwise, right? Because you know, there's the only way you can think now, that you have to get things right. So this is now where, in the world of finance, where you often end up, where people sometimes end up guessing certain numbers and making certain assumptions. I cannot do that, because in the world I came from, doing something like that can cost hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Now it may be a different risk, or it may be a different impact. But the impact, in my view, is just as important, because it's people's lives, right? And the last thing I want to do is to then do something for someone with their finances, and then 10, 20, 30 years down the road, their life is not in the best position because of me getting certain things inaccurate or wrong. So in order for me to then bring the same level of accuracy into finance, I build my own analysis system in the world of finance. And it's actually now a tool that I just finished building. Now I just have to put the security elements around the tool. But having built that tool allows me to analyze a person's numbers A to Z, down to the penny, down to the cent.
This may sound like a rudimentary basic question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
But I will ask it anyway.
Mhm.
How do you describe financial intelligence?
Very good question. I like that question. For me, I have different levels with regards to around financial thinking or intelligence or education. I have for us, we say financial education, then we go financial intelligence, then we go financial mastery, right? Financial intelligence is what I would call the next level. And what I would say, end result of financial intelligence is a person actually having financial independence, which means you don't need a job. You've got your things set up in such a way that you have your income coming, you might be doing business and all of those things. You don't need a job. In other words, you're free from being under the control of others, right? So now, with regards to the specific element of financial intelligence, it has so many different categories. And the categories that will include, yes, income, management of your money, understanding debt and liabilities and profit and loss and all of those things. Those are what I would probably call financial education. And intelligence now is when you now start to understand the way that the very, very wealthy few people think and operate with regards to money. And when you understand those things and now you're applying it in your life, not just knowing them, but actually applying them. And they're very different to what 90-something% of the people know about. Very, very different. Certain things, for example, and I'll give you a real example here. Say, for example, insurance. Amongst, for example, some of us in our community, even I remember many years ago while I was living in the UK, with regards to life insurance, our understanding is very, very skewed. It's not very good. But yet at the same time, life insurance is something that is it's an extremely powerful vehicle. It's an extremely powerful thing, right? So it's understanding all of those things, all of the concepts, what they really are, what they really mean, and applying them into your life. Not only that you have financial security, but you have, or at least well on your way for financial independence, and that when anything happens to you today, it's not the end of your family generation. It continues to the next generation, which means that you're not building in one generation or falling to the bottom in the next generation. You're building and building and building across generations.
Can you tell me or share with us a
Mhm.
pivotal moment when you realized your engineering discipline could be directly applied to your financial problem solving? What was that force that moved you to apply your to become a financial wizard?
Okay. Thank you for that. The long and short for myself is that I live by setting goals, right? And I started it since the age of 13 years old. I set a goal, and when I set a goal, it's not just to sound good. Most of the time, I don't tell anybody my goals, right? And I think the last time I did, I was about 17 years old. I remember a friend of mine. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but a friend of mine did not think very well when I mentioned one of my goals. And I thought, you know what? I'm done. I'm not telling anybody my business no more. I just stay quiet and just get on with it. Right? So I set goals. And as far as I'm concerned, I will achieve those goals. Right? And so I set goal, I achieved that, set another one, achieved that, and I kept going. And then when I moved to Canada, I and I had achieved certain goals. And what I also do is give myself like every 5 years I check and I check, where I am now compared to the previous 5 years, where I am now compared. And I do that. I started that since I was 25 years old. I check every 5 years before. And I remember it was in 2017, July 2017. And something just said, okay, start writing out your goals and dreams that you have in all the various areas of your life again. And I started to put together my spreadsheet and I started writing them down. And I realized to myself that as I was writing, a lot of these things I was writing were the same things that I was writing before I moved to Canada back in this would have been 2010, 2011, that period. And at that point, I thought, hold a minute. So I came to Canada since I wrote those goals. The first 5-year period passed, and many of these goals are still here. And I'm now in the middle of my next 5-year period to check again. And at that point, I thought, that's it. I literally just stopped. And I got up from my desk and I said to my wife, I said, if I'm in a job 5 years from now, I'm committing suicide. I'm done. This is the way I think. And yes, indeed, I did not have plans to commit suicide, which therefore means that if I had to walk off the job, that's exactly what I would have done. So from that point now, my everything was so alert to opportunities that would allow me to be in a position to be able to resign from the job. So I set certain targets and I set a deadline, and I also set a massive goal as well. So many different areas so that when that deadline comes, I'm off. And yes, indeed, I have to admit, when I was handing my notices, it was pretty scary. It was very, very scary.
It must have been scary. It must have been scary to hand in your notice.
Yes.
But that's interesting. We're talking with Trevor Dunlop, and on SpeakUP International, we seek to inform, to educate, and to inspire. And there's no question that what you're telling us so far about your life and your story and your careers is more than inspiring. I like the statement that you made with regards to setting goals and not telling anyone. You know, it's interesting. There's a book called Wishes Fulfilled, and I don't remember who the author is. It'll come back in a minute. That's what he suggests, that you must not share your goals with people because you're going to get people deterring you, at least trying to say to you, don't go for it. You're not going to be able to accomplish those goals. But here's my next question. This leads me to my next question. Help us to understand the elements that are necessary for business success. You talked you talked around that a little bit, but I know you help businesses and you help individuals. Talk to us a little bit about elements that you consider to be absolutely necessary for success in business, please.
Beautiful. I love that question. And I'm going to start by listing out some of them, right? And this may not be the full exhaustive list, but I would probably say some of them that I'm going to list are ones that are absolutely critical. One of the first one, it might sound strange, is humility. The next one I will also mention is the element of having a big end target, right? Or some people will say a why, and some people will say a big goal and dream. Some people say an audacious goal. There's whatever word, but you need to have something that is big, right? The next thing is you need to have an attitude of gratitude. And just as I mentioned that, I just show you here when I first kicked off in the world of business through real estate. This you see in my hand here is what I call a gratitude rock. And this is something that every time you touch it, you got to think about something you're grateful for. And even though I may not say it directly, whilst I'm speaking to you, I'm actually thinking and generating that feeling of something that I'm grateful for. This is, brought in, the idea was given to me from a group of entrepreneurs when I first started the world of real estate investment back in the UK. This was around 2005. So you need to have an attitude of gratitude. You need to have a mentor and you need to have a coach. And when I'm saying with these elements here, you need to be a person who, one, you say what you mean and you mean what you say. The next thing is that you need to have very high levels of integrity. It may not be perfect, but you absolutely need to have integrity. It's the root of trust. right? The next one is mutual respect. If you asking someone for certain things and their time and so on, you've got to respect that person, because at the end of the day, the most valuable thing that anyone has is their time. People can give away 1,000 or hundreds of thousands of dollars. They'll get that back. But if they give away half an hour of their time, they'll never get that half an hour back. And many people, when they're business owners or like to be business owners, they don't value people's time properly. You need to have what I would call, we often call it massive immediate action. In other words, you given instructions by a mentor or coach, you put it into action almost immediately and make sure you continue doing it for as long as you possibly can, or at least until you get success, or just keep it as part of your life. You remember I just pulled out that gratitude rock there? I learned about that back in 2005, and this is 2025, 20 years later. And I went to Whistler. My other one that I had in my bag was just a rock, wasn't the best. I went to Whistler and I found something. It looked so beautiful. I thought gratitude rock, and I got it. Right? So that showed that you maintaining the same teaching and learning that you've had for a while. And the next thing is that you got to develop grit. You have to develop grit, because even if you got a great idea and you think, okay, this is a money-making thing, when you hit the wall of entrepreneurship, it's very different. Mindset, thinking, experiences, circumstances, very different compared to being an employee. And many people collapse because of not having grit. But the funniest thing about it is that grit can be developed as long as people implement those other things that I mentioned earlier. Those, I would say, are some of the key things that people need to have in order to be successful in business.
At Dunlop Solutions, you emphasize financial literacy and independence.
Mhm.
What do you find are the biggest misconceptions
Mhm.
people have about building wealth?
One of the biggest misconceptions people have with building wealth is where people think that for example, the wealthy people, there's two big ones. The wealthy people are doing a lot of wrong things, and it's greed, right? People think that building wealth is linked with greed and you're doing a lot of bad stuff and those things, right? And then another one is linked with the element of how people are conditioned when it comes to money. People think that the love of money is the root of all evil. And as a result of that, they develop a fairly negative relationship with money, right? And that relationship is something that actually holds people back quite significantly. The truth be told is that, yes, I came across those statements when I was young, but at the time when I came across those things, I was in a position where I didn't have any money anyway, and we were suffering. And so I got to realize that, hang on a minute. I know, I, I know I'm a good person. I'm not going to do any bad stuff. But what I do know is that not having money is not good. I know I need money. And as a result of that, I was able to not allow myself to get conditioned negatively with regards to my emotion towards money. And then another thing that people also have happening is that when they see things to do with certain terms like financial advisors, or these combination of people with these sort of titles, they tend to think that they're all people selling them things that they don't need, and they're all out to get their money and so on. And the funniest thing about it is that very often the people who think this way are people who actually don't have money anyway, right? So it's okay. So what are they gonna scam you out of, right? But these combination of things cause people to see that world of financial independence and building wealth as a world that is not that good. But yet at the same time, everybody want to be their own boss, and they want to have generational wealth, and these communities, they want to have financial freedom, and they want to live on the beach. So it's like, it's almost like to say you want to have your dinner, but you don't want to eat. It's like, really? Or you want to or you want to fill your belly, but you have no intentions of eating. It's like, okay, how are you going to do this? And this is what's happening. And it's unfortunate.
Or you want to pay your bills and you want to travel, but you don't want to work,
But you don't
right?
want,
But that's what our world is like. It's full of paradox and contradiction, isn't it? I think it's
yeah.
part of the human condition. As a matter of fact, you talked about things being in your DNA, but that's part of our DNA, unless you have the grit that you spoke about, which I particularly like those elements, and I'll get back to them.
Mhm.
Now, you talked about living in England and you talked about going to school and doing well and being determined and focused. Talk to us about who or what would you say is responsible for the person you are today? Who or what would you say is responsible for the person that Trevor Dunlop is today?
That is that's a very good question. I probably might say infinite intelligence, or for spiritual people, God. And the reason being because um I was born in very humble beginnings. Many days we had nothing to eat. My mother hasn't, I'm not sure if she reached high school. She is considered so low down amongst her siblings that now almost none of them talk to her because of the choices and the decisions she made. My father, not a huge amount different. He didn't finish high school either. So my circumstances that I grew up in was not good. The environment I had around me was definitely not good. So if you were to say, like many people, they have examples of someone that they can look at and model their life after and all those things, I had none, zero, right? But one of the things that I that did happen was what actually caused me to change. And it was in church one day. I had to go to church that day. I was 13 years old. And at that day, my mom and brothers, all of them said they're not going, but I had to go. And that day changed my life. And in church, it was the usual readings, but the moral of one of them was faith as small as a mustard seed can move a mountain. And I might have heard it many times before, but that day it registered. It really registered that day. And from that day, I wrestled with it until I got home. And then I knew, by the time I got home, I knew exactly what it meant. And I knew exactly what I wanted to achieve by a certain time. And I went on the path. I literally put the blinkers on, not interested in anything, anybody else, not interested in channel news, not interested in what happening in the rest of the world. Just boom. And the level of intensity for myself increased when one teacher in school humiliated me in front of the class. What happened is that the school, well, schools will always need money for one thing or the other. And when my father used to give us at the end of the month, here they call it allowance, in Ghana we call it pocket piece. I used to take my money and save it since I was pretty young. I used to just save my money, and I would say, okay, when the school needs money for anything, I will take money from here and give it to the school. I started selling like sugar cake and all kind of bits to try to get a little bit of money myself to avoid having to go through the nose and the nose and the nose from my parents, right? And then one day I ran out of money. I was 14 years old. And the teacher, we need to give money for one event. And I said, I don't have it. The teacher said, you never have money for anything. And in school, my friends, when you get called up on stage for your performance in whatever subject, your friends will be at the back of the auditorium and they shout at 99.99% hunger. but because I hardly had anything to eat, most days we didn't have anything to eat. But anyway, but that day when that teacher did that, I remember going home and the level of humiliation, embarrassment, and pain, it was so much. And I said to myself, I might be born in poverty, but I'm not dying in poverty. I said, I will get what I want or I will die in the process, one or the other. But I'm not stopping until I get what I want. And that's when I shifted gears. I was never the same again. Never the
Wow.
same again.
Well,
I,
obviously, you got what you were looking for. I just have one question,
mm,
and this is something that I read in your bio.
mm,
You describe yourself as a solutionist.
mm.
What is a solutionist?
Okay, very good question. In fact, actually, I shouldn't even take total credit for that because it was a good friend of mine who was another business lady who actually said, Trevor, based on what you do and the type of person you are, you solving problems, you should call yourself a solutionist. So that's how the term came about for the first time, right? It's, a very good friend of mine. Her name is Claudette Hutchinson, right? In fact, actually, it was strange enough, I just left her a message this morning. But yes, it was she that came up with the term. But the funniest thing about it is that when you think about engineering, what are we doing? We are solving problems, right? So, and my brain, naturally, how my brain actually works is that somebody's telling me a problem, but what comes out of my mouth is a solution. I don't harmonize in problems, right? So I naturally think solutions. And strange enough, it caused a huge problem for a while in my marriage until you get to learn that when the wife is telling you something, she doesn't want you to solve the problem. She just wants you to hear what she's saying and make sure you understand what she's saying. And you sit with that for a while. And I'm thinking, what's the point? What's the point? Why am I supposed to be sitting with the problem? The problem is there. Get rid of the problem. So this is how I think. So now
No, that's
with
that's a man thing.
some,
And, if there's a problem, we want to fix it.
just
We
fix
don't just
it.
fix it. And I don't want to sit and talk about it for 15, 20 minutes. I know I got it. Let me get the wrench and I'll just fix it. Yeah, so I get that.
Yeah. And in terms of what I do, that's what I'm doing. You helping people with their finances is actually solving problems, right? Many people, they may, let's say something happens to them today. What is the rest of their life going to look like? What's the life of those who rely on them going to look like? Many people have no idea. They don't have no idea that it exists. And then when the light is shed on it, they have no idea how to fix it. So this is what I do, in the world of finance, especially now, you shed light on the reality of things that exist, and then you solve it. You jointly with them, you come up with all the solutions, you educate them on it, and then they get to realize, okay, yeah, this is good. I like this. It means something, and then you implement the solutions. Yeah.
As you speak, all kinds of thoughts are dancing around in my head,
Mhm.
all kinds of questions. But of course, time will not permit all
Mhm.
of that. But I'm curious to know
Mhm.
what took you to England in the first place and
Okay.
what was life like for you there?
Um, yeah, thank you. Well, in Guyana, we use the British system, the British education system. And I had an uncle living in the UK, and I know there's also America and Canada as well. But everybody had this big craze about America. But for me, I saw England as really the powerhouse for education and engineering, right? And it also, at the same time as well, came across to me like, yes, I know there are challenges and problems, but it seemed a little bit calmer compared to the USA. So as a result of that, since Guyana, my focus was, okay, my preference is the UK. And so when I did my A levels, I had three options in the end because my performance was quite good. I was accepted in the university in Guyana with the first year exemption, so straight into the second year. I was given a scholarship to go to the UK to do my engineering degree, and then my uncle living in the UK also offered for me to come to the UK. That was not the choice I was going to make. I was going to take the choice of the scholarship, but at that time, my mother asked for me to go through my uncle, so I thought okay, and I used that part in the end, and I went there. Life in the UK was tough. I almost lost my life a number of times. That's different. Um, that's not stories for another time, but it was extremely difficult. But I don't see any of those things as to have a negative effect on myself. I see them all as building me to the person that I am today. Um, there's some other stories that I can share linked with that, but we don't have enough time for us to get into those. But ultimately, in long and short, um, it's like gold, right? One of the ways from memory that you get to learn of how you purify gold is by doing what? Putting it through the fire, right? So when you put it through the fire, that's when you get all the, number of the impurities out and so on. And you end up with, you can get your pure gold out. So I see all of those challenges as things to help to shape me to being the person I am today. But it was tough. It was really, really tough. But at the same time, I should say it was also quite nice because you also did have points where it was really good. But ultimately, nothing stopped me. I continued having my success and progress all the way through. Yeah.
I think through your dedication and
Mm.
you were able to make your career transitions, and it was a lot through self motivation since it sounded like uh, your parents were not able to provide you the support that you needed, at least on some levels. And I'm just so happy to see that you were able to figure a way to uh, get what you thought you want, and now you're doing actually what you want to do, which is in finance. I thank you so much. I'm glad I got an opportunity to talk to you before the interview conversation. I think it's been great. And I know that you said earlier something to the effect of, oh, yeah, I have some other stories I can tell, but that would be for another time. I'm going to hold you to that. And I want to know what those other stories are. And yes, we are running out of time. Rita, is there something that you'd like to add here?
I would like to add just one more question, and I know we're running out of time, but it's
We are
important for
out
me
of
to ask
time.
this question. Are we out of time? But here's my question, and I know you're not going to take long to respond. Here it is. Let's suppose you are doing a presentation to a group of young men that look like you and that look like me and that look like Elton. I'm not going to say anything else about that. What three tips will you offer them to help them navigate their way through this very complex world? What three gems would you offer a group of young men who are studying to become leaders to help them navigate their way through this absolutely, I believe, complex world?
Wow, that is such a good question. And the funniest thing about it is that I'm going to be talking to such a group of young men, either later this month or next month. But the if I'm to pick top three things, I would say the first one would be they need to have an extremely good decision-making process that allow them to be able to make the right decisions. It's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that they need to have extremely high levels of discipline, because with discipline, all the other principles will work, but they have to have discipline. And the third one I would say is that they need to have high levels of humility as well, because with humility as the foundation, many of the other things will follow, as the gratitude, the integrity, and those things will follow. And at that time as well, they will not repel people who can put them in positions to improve their lives or to give them that extra help. Humility. Without humility, forget it. People are just going to think, forget it. I'm not going to give up my time for somebody who's not going to be grateful for it, right? So that's because you ultimately will need the help of other people to get where you want to go, right? And discipline for the other principles and the power of decision, because your life depends, where you end up in life depends on the choices you make, which means that you need to be able to have a good decision-making process so that you can make the right choices in life. So those would be my top three.
Thank you so much, Trevor, for spending this time with us. I know your time is precious. You're forever doing something. So, having to stop it and, focus in on this, I'm sure that caused an energy drain within itself. But thank you so much. And as soon as the conversation is prepared, you will receive a link from us and you can do whatever you want with it.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Elton. Thank you, Rita. What I also ought to mention very, very quickly here is thank you for doing what you're doing. I think what you're doing is very good. It's amazing, and I know from what you explained, Elton, I think you took the great initiative to start this, and yourself, Rita. So I really appreciate you doing this. And I'm hoping that a lot of people will actually tune in to the things that you're doing to enjoy the benefits of it, and that yourselves also end up being very fulfilled with what you're doing. So thank you ever so much for doing this. Truly appreciate it.
Well, and thank you. And if you happen to know of any other individuals that you think would be beneficial for us to have a conversation with, please, don't hesitate. You have my email address, you have my phone number. I mean, you know how to get to me. So, don't be shy. Let
For
me
sure, 100%.
let me know.
Will do 100%. Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in to Speak Up International. If you wish to contact our guest, Mr. Trevor Dunlop, please be prepared to submit your name, your email address, and the reason why you wish to contact Mr. Dunlop at linkedin.com. Mr. Dunlop has other social media accounts you can use to contact him that will be listed in the description section on Spotify and other social media platforms. Your voice has the power to inspire, influence, and ignite change. We'd love to hear your story. We invite you to connect to us by sending your message that includes your name, company or organization name, the valuable service you offer to your community, and your email address to info@speakuppodcast.ca. You can also find our new video podcast channel at bit.ly/speakup video, all one word. You can find our audio podcasts at www.speakuppodcast.ca. Our logo features a woman with her finger pointing up, mouth open, speaking up.
As soon as the website passes inspection, you will be able to gain access to the audio and video versions of each podcast using the following link, www.speakuppodcast.ca. As a member of our Patreon group, you will gain access to a wide range of exciting benefits. We are providing you with early access to new episodes and the opportunity to suggest topics or guests for future episodes. Your contribution of $2 or $5 monthly will not only help sustain the continuity of the podcast, but also allow us to embrace the overall listening experience for all of our dedicated followers. Help us help you. www.patreon.com/SpeakUp International. Don't miss our next episode. Join us again on SpeakUp International, where we aim to inspire, to inform, educate, and entertain you.